So what we'll be doing is looking at the basics of rigid body, how to use colliders, how to script with triggers, and how to do some raycast. So we'll be focusing for the most part on collision. So we want to be able to detect collision, be able to set up the game object so that it's able to detect collision. All right, so let's start with working with some of the basics of rigid body. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and create a plane here. All right, and let's see, we'll create a cube. Let me just move that cube up a little, resize it a little bit here. Make it a little taller. Just to kind of play with it a little bit here. Okay, make another cube. And then move it up. Just make it just be sort of like a little head here. All right. Actually, just resize it. Okay, so we'll pretend for now this is our robot, some kind of robot or something. Anyway, the idea here is we're going to see how this particular game object, and I'll go ahead and embed this so that the top part, the top cube, so that it's like one whole piece. So if I select it, you know, in terms of the parent object, it moves together, right? So there's the parent, this is the child. Okay, so say that I want this object just to see in terms of the physics of this object, you know, have it fall and see how it reacts and all that kind of stuff. So for example, if I were to tilt this object, would it fall, right? So I'll go ahead and, oops, tilt it. Let's see here. Okay, so if I go ahead and hit in the play mode, see in the back here, and let me align this with this view. So I'm going to select the camera to align so we can see it this way, sideways. Notice right now when I select the camera, I'm seeing it from the back. All right, so what I will do is now that I have the camera selected, I'm going to go to Game Objects, Align with View. So notice there is the same view we see here in our scene, we see in our camera preview. Okay, now let's go ahead and play it again. Control P. Notice that I played it and the object just hangs there. It doesn't fall or anything like that. Okay. So what we need to do is, in order for it to make it fall, we need to add a rigid body to it. So the rigid body is part of the physics engine built into Unity. So that's basically a component that we will be adding. Okay, what we need to do is add a rigid body to this cube, to the parent cube. Okay, not the head. So I've selected the cube. I'm going to add a rigid body component. So by the way, if it's not showing up, you can just start typing in rigid body, and then it'll should show up on there. Okay, so notice that in the rigid body component that we've added to the cube, it says that we have a mass of 1, use of gravity. We want to make sure it's checked, okay, so that we can simulate gravity in our scene. So here we go, Command P or Control P, and notice our object falls. Okay, so very simple. Okay, now that we've added a rigid body to our game object there, let's make it a little bit more fun by also adding some physics material to that. To do that, we need to import the standard package, okay? Standard asset package. So I'm just going to go into assets, import package, and then just look for where I'm storing my standard package, which you can also download from the internet. Okay, so we've added the standard asset, and now I'll go to the physics material folder. So if your standard asset folder is closed, go down to physics material, and here we have bouncy. So we can add this. We can add this two ways. We can just click and drag it right onto the cube, the cube that is intended to, not this one, but this one. Or we can just select it here and go to our materials under box collider and click on the target circle there, and then you'll notice that the physics material dialog box comes up, and I'll select, for instance, bouncing, and now it's added on there. So if we wanted to change anything on there, we would double click on bouncy, and then we would be able to change some of these things here. But let's see if we want to change it or not first. All right, so let's check it out now that we've added that and see what happens. So do play mode, and notice it bounces, and it keeps bouncing and bouncing and bouncing and bouncing. Not very realistic in a sense, but I mean, you know, initially it was a good little bounce there. Okay. All right. So let's change that. So you may or may not need to change it. So again, I'm double clicking on it. I could go here, double clicking on there if we want to. Let's change that to average and see what happens. Okay, a little bit more realistic in terms of the falling there. So anyway, so just be aware that you do have all these other type of physics material to take advantage of the physics engine in Unity, and you may need to do a few changes here and there. Okay, alrighty. Okay, so I'm going to create a new scene here to talk about using triggers. Alright, so new scene, let's call it trigger scene. Okay, so for this, we're going to look at using, in terms of scripting, we're going to do some scripting, and we'll use onTriggerEnter method to be able to detect if something has collided with something else. Okay, so there are three different type of triggers that we can use. One is onTriggerEnter, onTriggerStay, and onTriggerExit. So we'll look at all of those, all right, because that's going to be important in terms of being able to detect when one object has collided with the other, and when it's made that contact, all right, or when it's within the object, or when it has exited the object. All right, so let's see here. All right, so let's start with creating a cube, and then we'll also create a sphere. And we just make sure the sphere is selected, and we just kind of want to move the sphere right next to it. We'll have the sphere, we'll be able to, what we'll do is we'll make the sphere so that we can move it and then collide with the cube. All right, since the sphere is selected in the hierarchy, I'll go ahead and just move it right next to it, and then eventually what we'll want to do in play mode is be able to move it and have it collide with the cube there. Okay. All right, let's check out the camera real quick right here. All right, again, it's just seeing the back of it. So let's select the camera. Go to game object, align with view. Alrighty. Okay. So as you'll notice, we have the cube has the box collider on there, and so that will allow us to be able to, having that. It's important an object has a collider so that it's able to detect any collisions. And then you'll notice that the sphere also has a sphere collider. And you can add different type of colliders in terms of a component. For example, if you don't see an object that has a collider, you can just, if you type in collider here, as you can see, you have all these different type of colliders that you can actually add to different type of objects. So obviously you want to try to match the object with the type of collider. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's create two scripts, and we'll put them. We'll create first a folder. Call it a script folder. I'll call it scripts. And since we're going to have a couple of scripts there, I want to make sure I create that folder. So the first one, we'll call it, well, let's create it. Call it trigger. And then the second one would need to be able to move the object. So move script. All right. So we're going to place the trigger script on the cube. Okay, so now the cube has a trigger script. Oops, wrong one. Okay, and then the move on the sphere. Remember, we want to be able to move it. Obviously, they're empty right now. It's standard template, Unity template for the scripts, right? So they're basically the same right now. Okay, so let's go to the move script first. So we'll double click in there and then make sure we open up Visual Studio. All right, so we're in Visual Studio and we want to create the move script. So to start with, we're going to start it in our update method. Since it's detecting, it's going to detect whatever's in there 60 times a second, since it's 60 frames per second. All right, so we'll start with, we want to type in float, so we know what kind of variable it is. So we want to make sure that is equal to, so we want to get the input, so we want to create that float variable, and so we want to give it a name. Here's our name, and so we want to be able to detect our mouse movement here. Okay, so we're going to call it input, or start with input, get axis, open and close parentheses, and within there we want to be able to use get the axis name, which is in this case mouse X. Okay. And we kind of want to slow down a bit, so we're going to divide it by 10, so that we're going to get whatever this number, we'll get a number from our mouse X movement and divide that by 10. Make sure you put a semicolon to close that out. All right, So again, we'll do float my equals input again dot get access, open and close parentheses, get our axis here, string axis, we need to type it in. Remember, this is determined in our preference under Unity. So under input, by the way, divided by 10, slow it down in terms of, you know, the numbers that or in terms of the movement there, and as it captures the number. So then, so we've got these two numbers being captured. They're float type numbers, meaning that, you know, they're mixed numbers, right? And so now I want to be able to use it. So I'm going to start it and be able to move our object, which, remember, this script is on our sphere. So I'm going to do transform dot translate, because that's in, you know, in terms of one of the components that we're accessing, right, which is the XYZ component, to be able to move the object. And then we're going to use those variable numbers that we are able to capture from our mouse movements in our X, Y, and Z coordinates. Oops. So MY. And then for here, we'll type 0F. Remember, 0F stands for float, so we want to, you know, make sure it's we add the F there. Okay, semicolon. Now we're putting this in the up. And by the way, we didn't have to have these spaces in here, but, you know, just so you can be able to see it better. Okay, so notice right here there's a little circle. That means it hasn't been saved yet. I haven't built it, so I'm going to go ahead and build it. So when I build it, it will not only save it, but it'll also maybe detect if there's any errors on there. So build it. And notice that there are 0 errors. Okay, so remember, you could go to build and then build all, or it may be different than with your, this is a Mac Visual Studio, so maybe different in a PC, but you still go to build and then it'll be, say, build on there. Okay, anyway, so there we have it in terms of the script that we're going to use. Let's go back to Unity. And let's see if it works in terms of being able to move our sphere. So we'll go into the play mode. So it's not quite moving the way we want to. I want to be able to move. I move on the X value. It's going not into the cube. Obviously, if I move up, I'm able to move it up and down. But when I move the X value, and I think it's because we've limited it in our script. So let's check out our script here. Okay, yeah. So as you can see, we've put for the Z-axis, which we need to be able to change that, use that variable number so we can move it in the Z-axis. We set it up so that it would not move in the Z-axis. Okay, so we'll have to change that. So we'll just get rid of this here. 0 F, so that we limit the X-axis, and then change that to X. So we'll use that variable number when we move our mouse in the X-axis, okay, and then it'll use that number to move it in the Z-axis. All right, let's try that again. All right, so I'm going to move in the X-axis, and there we go. So at least we're able to move into our cube. Okay, so now we want to be able to detect if if it's the sphere has entered the cube or has made contact with has made some kind of contact with the cube. So upon maybe collision with it while it's in it, and then when it exits. So now we'll need to go to our trigger script. Okay. So now we are in our trigger script, and so where we want to add the untrigger enter functions or methods, we don't necessarily need it to be within any of these two methods, so we can actually delete these methods, or we can just go ahead and just write the trigger methods above that or below that, it doesn't matter, but within the class. Okay, so we're within this class right here. So you notice when I click on this left curly brace that this is highlighted, so we know that we're within the block of this class. All right, so to start with, we don't want any return, so we're going to click on type in void on trigger. So on trigger enter to start with, and notice it automatically writes in for us in the parameters the collider other, so that it's going to detect when something else other makes a when it enters that trigger. Okay, and what we wanted to do basically for now is just to display saying something that it has entered it. Okay, so to do that, we're going to make sure that we're able to detect the other object, and so we'll start off with other. Okay, there it is, game objects, and then we want the name of that game object, and we'll concatenate it by adding a plus there, and we want a string, to say something in there. So we'll put a little space in there. Cube. Oops. Okay. And so now that should, so that when something enters it, this should be displayed on there. Okay. So then we'll do another one. Do void on trigger stay, and print again. Basically, we can just copy this right here. And this time we wanted to say is in the cube. Okay. Then one more type of trigger. Let's look at that. So when it exits it, and paste that, left the cube. So let's give it a shot, or let's build it. Control B, Control Shift B, or Command B. And let's go back to Unity. All right, let's see what happens here. Okay, so notice that I move into it, but nothing is displaying. Okay, so it hasn't detected it yet. All right, so part of the reason is because we need to make sure that we've set up our cube correctly and our sphere. Okay? So we're missing something here. And basically, what we're missing is that within the sphere itself, we also need a rigid body because we're moving this object back and forth. And so in moving this object back and forth, we need to be able to have a rigid body so that it can work with the on triggers and so on. So let's type in rigid body. Oops, wrong. There we go. All right. We'll uncheck gravity because we don't want it to fall when we play it. Let's try it again. So as we can see, nothing is showing up in terms of our console right here. Okay. Cube has the trigger script on there. Oh, I see what's going on. We didn't check its trigger. We should have done that because we know that this is the object that is going to be colliding with. So this is going to, we need to make sure that we check that it is a trigger so that when we move the sphere and it hits the box, it triggers, it will use the functions on triggers, enter, on trigger, exit, and so on. Okay? So let's try that again. And let's see here. There we go. Okay, so as soon as we're still in it, notice the numbers here keeps going up. Notice this number's still on cube. And then notice that the sphere has left the cube when we go into it, and then we go in, we've entered it. Notice the number on the cube up here is 4. Now we'll leave the cube and it should change to 4. You see? Okay. Okay, so now we'll continue with ray casting. So let's go ahead and create another scene here. All right, let's start with creating a plane. And let's move this down a little bit. And we'll go ahead and add a cube. Zoom in on there. Alright, actually I want to move this cube about here. I'm going to go ahead and create a couple more cubes there. I'll just duplicate that one, Command D or Control D. And these cubes are the idea here is with ray casting is that we'll use, I'll use this sort of like a barrel of gun or something. Keep in mind, ray casting is basically the act of sending out an imaginary line called a ray and seeing what it hits. So game developers use ray casting all the time for things like aiming, determining line of sight, gauging distance, destroying objects, and so on. And so what we'll do is we'll destroy these two cubes, and this would be like I said, like a barrel of gun. Okay, so let me just resize that to make it look like it, like a barrel, or just something to aim with. All right, so squash it down a little bit. Oops, actually, I just realized something. Now, when you do your raycast, if you're going to use it, on an object like this, keep in mind that in something like a cube, the raycast will use your z-axis to shoot out. It'll shoot that straight line through the z-axis. So I'm going to rotate this, aiming right now towards this way on the z-axis, and then I'll move it, left and right to be able to delete these two objects. Okay. All right. So let me rotate it. So right now it's just going straight down, aiming straight down the middle. So when I change it to my move tool, so let's make sure that have this cube selected, which is this one right here, and then we're to make sure that we're still, by the way, so in terms of what we're seeing here in terms of the z-axis and the x-axis and the y-axis right here, we're seeing it in the global view. So no matter how I rotate this object, it will still, look like it's actually, within the global aspect of it, it's, that's how it's situated. But if I want to see this particular object z-axis, I have to select it and change it from global to local. Now, as I notice, actually, let's see here. Yeah, so that's my z-axis pointing out that way, right? Take it back again. Okay, so there we go. We're set up. And let me look real quick, make sure it's a little bit too high, so it may just miss out there. So I'm going to lower it down a little bit. So it's about the same level as the cube, because you'll shoot the ray out this way, right? So the y is 0.26. Y is 0.3, so that's good. All right. Okay, so I'll set it back up this way. Let's look at our camera real quick. Notice our camera, we're seeing the gameplay. Yes, back up again. So, select the camera, game object, align with view. Okay, so now it's set up with this view right here. All right. So what we'll need to do first is we'll we set up our game objects. We'll create a script, and within that script, we'll add it to the cube, to that cube right there. Okay. All right. So let's go to our script folder, create. So this will be our ray cast script. All right. So now what we'll do is first we want to be able to move the object left, right, so that we are able to hit those objects. Okay. So we need to be able to rotate it. We just want to rotate it left or right. Okay. So in order to do that, inside our update method, we'll set up some variables so that we can capture the mouse movement, and then we'll use those numbers in order to move it. All right, so we'll start off with float equal. Oh, not equals. You gotta give it a variable name. equals, let's capture the input, the mouse movement. And so we know that it's mouse x. When we're removing the mouse on the x variable, back and forth basically. Semicolon. Okay, so I'll just copy this real quickly. And then we'll capture the y movement. Oh, actually, since we're just going to move it back and forth, we don't need to do the y movement. So we'll just do the x. Okay. Yeah, so we don't need to add more numbers in there. Okay, so transform dot rotate and again we just want to move it in the y value, so we'll use that number there. So we'll do 0 f and 0 f. Okie dokie. All right. Okay, let's see. So let's put this script, and let's make sure we put the script on the our gun barrel. Okay, so we should be able to move it. Okay, so notice how we're able to move it back and forth. And, you know, eventually is that we want to be able to destroy those objects. Okay? All right. Going back to here. All right, so now we'll do the ray casting. Okay, so to do the ray casting, we need to create the raycast method. So we need to create the method, and then we'll call up the method. All right, so let's do that. So remember, when you create a method, we want to make sure we're not creating it within the start method or within the update method, but we can call it up within the update method. Okay, so we'll start over here. Alrighty, so we'll do void check for ray cast hit. Oops. Okay, so we're starting to create our method here. Make sure we put curly braces. Okay, so we'll start off with the raycast method itself. Oh, and we're going to use raycast hit. Okay. With this one, with this type of method, we'll be able to not only find out if we were able to hit something, but also it will give us information in terms of the object we've hit. Okay, so we'll use that in terms of we'll be able to know if that particular object, what type of object or what object it was hit. because usually raycast is a Boolean type of um, method. So it either tells us it hit something or it didn't hit something, right? True or false. Okay, so let's give it a variable name. Hit. And then we'll. Alrighty. So if then we're going to do physics dot raycast, and we know that we need parameters in there. So first the position, then the next parameter is the direction. We want to go forward. Then this is what's going to is going to give us you know, whatever it's going to output, basically the, you know, the name of the object or what it's hit, and then using the hit variable there. Okay. All right. So now we need our curly brace, since we're going to have more than one line in our block here for the if block. So first we wanted to print, you know, basically display in the console what is it that it hit. And we could only do that with this method because of the out keyword there. Okay. All right. So we'll say it's destroyed. Okay. So here I'll put the name of one of the cubes, and it'll say that cube's name destroyed. Right. Put exclamation mark there. Yes. All right. Okay, so then we wanted this to destroy it. So destroy, then our parameters. Oh, sheesh. Okay, so hit dot collider dot game object. Okie dokie. All right, and semicolon. Okay, so now we have finished this up. So we created it. We created our method here, our function, and now we need to use it. Okay, so just creating the function is not enough. We need to call it up. Okay. All right, so we need to do that in our update method. We're going to use that function. Remember, we didn't create the function within the update method, but we're going to call it up. Alrighty. So let's go ahead and do that. So, check. Oops. There it is. It comes up already. And we need to give it parentheses in there, and of course a semicolon. Okay, so let's go ahead and run it or build it. All right, let's go check it out. Alrighty, let's get into the play mode, and let's see what happens. Boom, there it goes. So cube 1 destroyed. You can see right here. Move this over there. Boom, cube 2 destroyed. There you have it.